This is my current style, and this is where I started. Here's everything I know about style and exactly how you can develop one for yourself. Starting with some corrections. You're not gonna like what I'm about to say. Feel free to argue with me in the comments, but I think saying you don't have an art style is like saying Americans don't have accents. I know you think you don't have one, but listen to me when I say it's far more likely that you just don't like the style you've developed so far. A generic style is still a style, whether it be ugly, unrefined, or all over the place. In order to draw anything at all, you have to draw it in a specific way. You can't draw a rabbit in every possible way at once because there is only one drawing. Therefore, only one style has been used. The process of learning how to draw creates style without you even realizing it. It just begins scattered and undefined. Like a ball of clay, it's your job to mold it into something to your liking. Okay, Whispervine, maybe I do have a style, but that doesn't mean anything when it's inconsistent as all hell. Do you know what the only consistent part of creating art is? Yeah, it's the artists themselves. Therefore, if you figure out how to paint in your own unique voice, consistency and originality will develop on their own, right along with your consistently original self. Style is made up of two different things: your habits and your personal tastes. If you don't choose a style through active study and intention, a style will choose you via the habits you develop. We need both to achieve the elusive dream art style. Since many of us are self-taught, we don't have much control over the bad habits we may accidentally pick up during our journey. But we do have control over our intentions, so that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. Finding your dream style is a hands-on process, so let's pull some weeds. If 70% of style is personal taste, then we must recognize that this is the same kind of yummy that's in beautiful pink sunsets and Gojo Satoru. Whatever sparks your interest, strikes your fancy, and makes your soul sing, that is the inspiration you need to create from. Just like what Miss Sunomiya said, a picture that will draw in a crowd isn't some practice sketch, it's art. And what is the most important thing in creating a piece of art? It's love. This part requires a bit of self-exploration. I've been on this journey for an ungodly amount of time, and believe me when I say it never ends. Even so, there is a version of you that exists in the now that we can study to our heart's content. I believe there is an aspect of style that comes from deep within, but I'm not someone who can help you figure out just what that is. What I can do is help you figure out what results from that. In order to figure this out, we're gonna need something external to guide us. Enter Pinterest, my beautiful loving wife. Here's a question. What kind of references do you use? What does your Pinterest feed look like? For me, mine is full of everything but art. I believe the biggest contributing factor to the development of my style has been referencing things that aren't references, the majority of which are chosen simply because I find them aesthetically pleasing. They have virtually nothing to do with what I'm painting. For example, I've used these images as reference for skin, and these images as reference for hair. You may be inclined to ask, isn't that breaking the rules? Absolutely. If you think about it, stylization at its core is just fashionable rule breaking. The biggest thing I use Pinterest for is to refine my personal aesthetic. It is through said refinement that I find exactly what my taste is. Gather a ton of pictures together that appeal to you, whether it be vibes, nostalgia, or its substance. Keep going until you have a specific aesthetic you want to go for, and now you have a dartboard for the attempts you're about to make. It's crucial that these are unrelated to arts, as this diversifies your style a bit more. We're going for abstract personalization. Don't worry, we'll talk about artists in a bit. My art is most well known for the freakish amount of detail and looking like hard candy. Can you guess what I use for reference? To clarify, no, it definitely doesn't have to be candy. It can be anything from shattered glass to confetti, clouds, liminal spaces, heinous deep sea atrocities. Not even the sky is the limit. Why not take some semblance of your inspiration from black holes? You just have to sit down and think of things to search that would have a similar aesthetic as what you're going for in your art. Pinterest algorithm is fantastic for this sort of thing. Once you find out what you're looking for, the rabbit hole is endless. Even a shot in the dark can lead you down the right path. Once you have a bit of a library built up, ask yourself, What do I like about these images, and how can I include those aspects in my art? My biggest piece of advice here is don't be afraid to get unconventional. The only rule to creative expression is that there are no rules. The method to your madness lies within your technical skills, a language through which you can communicate anything you wish. Once you learn how to speak it, restrictions become obsolete. I encourage you to develop an aesthetic before you worry about drawing. You'll have a much easier time refining your style with a blueprint instead of a vague feeling of mediocrity. For the purpose of direction and goal setting, I recommend listing these things out. They won't implement themselves after all. Remember that your dream style requires lots of care and intention. Now that that's over, as promised, I want you to give me 5 to 10 of your favorite artists pertaining to style. I'd actually love it if you commented your list below so I can find new art to gawk at. Thanks. It may not look like it, but this list is extremely OP. You just need to crack the code and find out exactly what you love about these styles. For example, I love Orange Sekai's work because of her pearlescent color schemes and her ability to perfectly contrast the simple and clean with complex, detailed rendering. And I love Kawase for his breathtaking mood and lighting scenarios. These things may be difficult to identify at first, but as your artistic eye develops, they will start to jump out at you like a hungry bobcat. Don't feel bad if you don't know exactly what draws you to these artists just yet. You will get better over time. Just try your best and we will go from there. Whatever you come up with, these lists hold the blueprints for your future stylistic endeavors. As I mentioned in my last video, which I will link in the card in the top right, I recommend making these lists at the beginning of every year and focusing on improving one of the traits in every new piece you make. For example, you could focus on mood lighting in one piece and fluidity in another. By the end of the year, you'll be that much closer to your goal. Of course, you can repeat and do studies as necessary, but that's the general framework I use when I want to improve anything about my art. Furthermore, here's a little something I like to call art snacks. Art snacks are how I give myself direction while I paint. Essentially how this works is you eat something in the form of references, and instead of your drawing is a direct byproduct of that. You shouldn't work on an empty stomach after all. Whenever I feel super adamant about including specific stylistic elements in a piece, I'll make a mood board surrounding those things and utilize it throughout my process. If you're anything like me, you need something right in front of your face or you'll literally forget its entire existence. That's why these snacks are so important. It's hard to keep track of everything you'd want to implement mentally, especially because drawing is a very flow state inducive process. I don't know about you, but I kind of leave my body while I work, so I need to make my intake of stylistic info as smooth brain as possible. The easier a task is, the more likely you are to actually do the darn thing. Another thing worth mentioning is those little tutorials some artists make. Some people find these unbearably confusing, but I think it's just dependent on how clearly they're made. A ton of artists out there make these resources just for us to learn from, so make sure to check if your favorite artists have made any. They're an extremely valuable resource, purely because it's one of the only opportunities out there for you to peek under the hood, so to speak. They give you more of an inside look of how a specific artist's style is achieved. As a side note, some paid content on sites such as Gumroad or Patreon are super helpful as well. Don't sleep on those if you're willing to spend a few buckaroos. My belief is that you can learn anything you need to know at no cost to you, but it does get increasingly difficult the more niche you get. Not impossible, but difficult indeed. I think supporting artists is great too, but a lot of us are totally broke, and that's so very real. One of the most important things to accept as an artist is that stagnation is your mortal enemy. Look, I know you want a super consistent and recognizable style, but the truth is that your style is bound to change over time, and that's okay. There is an extent to how much one should pursue artistic constancy. It should not come at the detriment of your growth. We humans change a lot throughout our lives. I have many questions for those that don't, but besides them, just like you, your taste will fluctuate over time. Don't be afraid to honor that in your art. Of course, despite everything, you will always be you. I believe that's enough to run a joining thread to... I believe that's enough to join. I believe that's enough to run a joining thread through everything you create. So please never suppress your incoming bloom for the weeds that hold you down. Your voice deserves to be heard in the past, present, and the future. Embracing growth is important, and what better way to experiment than with a sketchbook? I still adamantly encourage this even if you're a digital artist. Sketchbooks allow us to experiment freely, doodling without consequence. Experimenting with your style often encourages growth, as you're stepping outside your comfort zone. Set your creative mind free as much as you can, and give yourself every opportunity to fall in love with something new. Every time you hate your style, remember that we are a species that fail miserably to look at ourselves objectively. Sometimes being an artist is like wandering through a labyrinth comprised of your greatest fears. The creative mind is a fickle thing. Some believe satisfaction is an illusion, quickly dissolving at a glance to the piercing blue light emanating from your magnum opus. Somehow, it still isn't enough. The human condition makes us inherently biased to think we are mundane. Compared to someone else, we will always be the lesser novelty, simply because we are not them. Remember, we never truly see our faces with our own two eyes. We see reflections, ideas, and representations. We hear our own voices in conversation, but we cannot become the other side. You could be the best artist in the world, and you wouldn't even know it. Brains are weird.